Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Jenelle Riley from Variety. Before we're joined by our guests today, I want to let you know that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a nonprofit organization that relies entirely on donations to provide emergency assistance and free educational programs to SAG-AFTRA artists. This conversation today is made possible thanks to the generosity of our supporters. Over the past year, the foundation has given over $6.5 million in COVID relief to more than 7,000 performers. If you are a SAG-AFTRA artist and you need help, please ask. And if you can help, please give. Information can be found in the description of this video. Thank you for your support. We're joined today by an audience of SAG-AFTRA actors. So I actually always like to start at the beginning by asking actors how they got their SAG card. And I know this is kind of unusual because a lot of you are making your American TV or film debuts. But let's start with someone who I know has a SAG card. Let's start with Joel.
I should have brought my SAG card and just flashed it. I did a job called Open Window, directed by lovely Mayor Goldman. I didn't realize at the time about the two-step process of getting a SAG card. And then years later, I did another job and I was like, well, obviously I'm a SAG member. And they're like, no, you're Taft-Hartley. And I'm like, what is that? And then realized that I had to go and apply, and that job made me somewhat eligible to apply for my SAG card. That's how I did it. It was back in 2005.
Wow.
That was a terrible story, terribly told, but that's
Yes, you made it work.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm going to work on it for next time. But that was it, Open Window, and I thank Mayor Goldman for giving me a job. Yeah, there you go.
William, what about for you?
I had that good old-fashioned rite of passage that a lot of New York actors have doing Law and Order. That was my first SAG gig, and I think it was similar to Joel. It was like, I think the first one I was like Taft-Hartley, and then I had to join on the second Law and Order that I did. So I did like Law and Order CI first, and then when I did Law and Order Original Recipe, that's when I had to join.
And I feel like I may have asked you this before, but I've forgotten. Were you ever the killer?
No, I was the killer's brother, and I was a really cold cop one time. But yeah, never.
That's range. And Chase, I'm also pretty sure you have a SAG card because I've seen you in a lot lately.
Yes, I am a SAG member, but I don't really know how, but my mom has all the information about what happened and whatnot.
Do you remember your first job on camera?
My first job on camera was the First Wives Club.
Wow. Okay. So you're a fairly recent SAG member. I love that. Aaron, how about for you?
I actually got my SAG card by being part of this project. So I'm also a very recent SAG member.
I love that. What was the first thing you ever did on camera? Was it a commercial, a movie, a show?
First thing I ever did on camera was an ITV series called Prime Suspect 1973, I think. It was a very small part, 2 episodes in a 6-part series. But, you know, the first job means that you're a professional. So I was more than happy to be part of that.
Sheila, how about for you? Is it also Underground Railroad?
What as my first screen role?
Well, no, your SAG card, but.
No, so I did Underground Railroad, and then a couple of months later I did Bruised, which is the Halle Berry's directorial debut, which is coming out later this year. And very similar situation to Joel, but then lockdown hit and I was like, well, I don't need to do anything about that. And then the first job that I got out of lockdown required me to be a SAG member. So I'm very recent. I'm 2020. Yeah.
Amazing. And Thuso, for you?
It was the show.
It
Yes.
was.
It was the show, yes.
That's
I'm
amazing.
fancy now.
Well, I love that because I know you're an Emmy nominee for your work in a South African series, but this being your first American project, that's so cool.
It is. Small steps.
And Barry, have you ever acted? I'm trying to think. Have you ever, put a Hitchcock cameo in your films?
No, never.
Really?
My voice is in all the films. My voice is in this one too. But you gotta really know what you're listening for to hear it. Anytime you hear an enslaved person calling out to one of the other characters, that's my voice.
Really?
Because I wanted to be a part of this. So yeah, so I'm the one calling for Moses, Boss Connolly. That's me. And in the first episode, I forget when, there's another time where I'm calling for someone. But yeah, I wanted my voice to be a part of it, but I don't know. I didn't do it on set. I don't want SAG coming after me that I took this voice role from someone else. But no, I do not have a SAG card. I stay very
He's a
comfortable.
voiceover artist.
Yeah. Well, actually, I want to start at the beginning with Barry. I know the Underground Railroad limited series is based on the 2016 Pulitzer Prize winning novel of the same name by Colson Whitehead. I'm curious, how did the book find its way to you, and what interested you in adapting it specifically as a limited series?
Yeah, so I had been obsessed with the Underground Railroad ever since I was a child. Just hearing the words semantically, I just saw Black people on trains underground. And growing up in Miami in the early 80s, there were all these Black men who worked these industrial jobs, whether at factories, the last bits of industry that were in Miami, or down at the port, these longshoremen. So I thought they were the people like them that had built the Underground Railroad. So it was always something that stuck with me because it was such a wonderful feeling to be in school and go, hey, people like your granddad built the Underground Railroad. And then I had been familiar with Colson Whitehead from his first novel, The Intuitionist, which takes elevator inspectors in like a fictional New York City and creates this almost like Jedi, like Godfather kind of world out of it. And so when I heard he had done something where he'd taken the conceit of the Underground Railroad and actualized it, I thought, oh, this is the perfect way to use my voice, which was important to me. I wanted to find a way to honor my ancestors through moving images. And then to pair that with something that, I don't know, recall this childhood feeling I had. And so even before Moonlight premiered at Telluride, I had tracked myself and my agents and Adela and Plan B tracked Colson down and got a copy of the book. And we were already going down the path before Moonlight even premiered at Telluride.
I'm sure I'm not the first person to point this out, but your two most recent films are also set in the past and yet could not feel more timely. Is there something about revisiting the past and often showing maybe how far we haven't come that interests you?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I just keep working my way farther and farther backwards. Medicine for Melancholy, my first movie, is very much of the present moment in which it was filmed. Moonlight's a little bit of a period piece, and then Beale Street goes back farther. Underground Railroad goes back farther. We could say The Lion King is prehistoric. Maybe lions did talk back in the day, so that's even further. I don't know. I think as we get further and further into this future where we have more information than we've ever had at our fingertips, and yet somehow we're not utilizing that information, as well as the inventors of the internet or people who thought that this idea of having access to words would improve civilization. So I think maybe as storytellers, we're reaching further and further back to go, no. We keep repeating these same mistakes, or we talk about generational trauma. We keep re-aggrieving these same people. And so I think illuminating the past is a nice way to accentuate or elevate or illuminate things in the present.
Absolutely. And as with all of your previous works, you put together this remarkable ensemble of great actors, ranging from, some established people to some people who might be newer faces to us here in America. Obviously, we have to start at the beginning with your Cora. Thuso, can you talk about what drew you to this role? And Barry, I hate to use the word discover because, like I said, you're a very accomplished actress, but how did you sort of become aware of her?
I read the book only after having met Barry. When I started the audition process, I didn't know that it was based on a book because I didn't read my manager's emails, but it's okay. We are where we are. But, coming to read up the book, going through the journey with Cora and finding myself in a space where, yes, it's telling the story of the enslaved body, but through different eyes, through fresh eyes, you know, because with Cora, she's experiencing the world for the very first time, and it has this fantastical realism in it. It felt like something I'd never seen before, but relating with Cora to a point where I felt like she was a voice set in the 1800s, but speaking to parts of me that are now in 2019. And so it was that that made me want to be a part of the story, because I felt it was one, very powerful, very different, but also very important to us and relevant to us today.
And Barry, for you, I mean, this is such a tall order for anyone to fill.
It is a tall order. And, you know, I think because of that, I knew we'd have to search far and wide. Francine Maisler, who was our casting director, you know, she's great. She just has networks all over the place. And we scoured the States, and, you know, we scoured the UK, we scoured the continent of Africa, and received great submissions from all over the place, you know, from all these different Black women. And it came down to Thuso and another young woman who is now a SAG member, who is doing amazing things and is going to be famous. And maybe 5 years from now, we'll talk about, you know, the two of them auditioning for this role with Stephan James, because we were releasing Bill Street at the time when Thuso had her callback, and her and Stephan did the scene. And famously, her contact flipped inside out, but she kept going with the scene. And I think because
you
of that,
worked me, Barry, you worked me.
It was just a sign that I knew this character was going to go through such a huge range of emotions, and that it was going to be such a long shoot. I wanted somebody who was very strong and very present. And I knew that at the beginning of the journey, she was going to express herself, not so much with words, but with the look in her eyes, with the way she carries her shoulders. And Thuso just had all of those things in ample supply. And so she booked the part, man. She booked the part.
I'm sorry, I have to go back to this contact flipping, because I've never had that happen in my life. Did you stop your audition?
She kept going, bro. She kept going. Because her and Stephan were, I forget which scene it was, but her and Stephan were doing this scene, and it was just like, it was intense, bro. And she's like crying, and it's like Viola Davis and Fences, you know what I'm saying? But like in an audition, and then at the end, I was like, "Are you all right?" She's like, "No, my contact is upside down." I don't wear contacts, so I don't know what that means. But then I
wear contacts, and that's a traumatic thing to happen. Especially like if that would have happened in an audition that you really cared about. It's not like the worst thing in the world, but in that context, that would be devastating.
Yeah, I flew out of the room afterwards. I was like, I can't see. It's like, okay, thank you, Barry. Thank you, Francine. It was great. Bye. I had to go fix my eye.
And yet here we are.
I mean, you knew she could get through that. She could get through anything.
Exactly.
Joel, what about for you? How did you become aware of this project, and what attracted you to it?
Dee Gardner told me about it. We'd worked together on The King, and, you know, Barry and Plan B, of which Dee is, you know, a major component, or the driving force of, have been collaborators for a long time. She told me about Underground Railroad, and I then started to actually get quite sort of on my toes about it. I've talked about it a little bit lately, but, you know, I got an energy about me like I used to have when I was a lot younger, of like starting to kind of follow the trail, like a sort of like a hound sniffing on a trail. It was like, how do I find Barry? How do I talk to him about this? Just sort of chasing it down because it was him. But yeah, Dee was the informant that told me about it. Yeah.
William, what about for you? I mean, I think people know you mostly for your work on The Good Place, which is obviously very different, but I've been fortunate enough to see you in some of your more dramatic roles.
Yeah, actually, it was just the old-fashioned way. It was a submission. I mean, I'd known about the project for a long time, but I was just sort of like, well, I will be watching this one. I'm pretty sure, you know, like, as it is with any actor, you're like, most of the time you hear no. And so it's like, so it's pretty great to like get an opportunity to audition for it. And I just thought that the audition materials were so nuanced and interesting and good that I was like, well, if this is the only chance I get to play with these scenes, I really want to try to dive in and mess with it. And then we sent it off, and I got a call a few weeks later. And so it was really like, of the jobs that are like really important to me, it was like sort of the shortest process in a lot of ways, where it's just like, it went into the ether, and usually it just means that it's gone, you know, the submission is gone, but then like this one came back, which was amazing.
And Chase, for you?
Well, me getting the role, it was like any other role. I got the audition, and then I went to New York. But in the making of me learning the script, when I got the script, I learned it in about 24 hours.
Wow.
When I got the script, I just felt amazing. I felt that I could rock it in a way. And I felt that the script was so powerful. And I told my mom, I was like, Mom, this is mine. I got this. I'm gonna rock it. And so after that, I learned it in 24 hours. I went to New York, and I did the audition. And about 2 days later, I got the call to come to LA with Barry and Miss Francine. And so, and the funny thing is, me and Thuso were there at the same day.
Really?
So I went to do the audition, and it was great. And so, yeah, it was basically the old-fashioned way. You can say it.
That's not the old-fashioned way for a 9-year-old, bro. It's not the old-fashioned way. I'll say, I said Thuso's scene partner was Stephon James when Chase came to LA, because the script you learn were the sides. Because of the character, I wrote an extended sequence for him to audition with. And Dom McManus, who was in Vice, which Dee Dee and Jeremy also produced in Plan B, he was Chase's scene partner. And we threw a lot of curveballs at Chase. And you did rock it, bro. And he crushed them all.
This may sound like a strange question, but Chase, you spend so much time with Joel. You two are, in so many scenes together. Did you only meet when you got to set, or was there any kind of, I don't want to say chemistry read, but how did you sort of know that relationship would be, so realized on screen?
Well, the first time me and Joel met was, I think it was a table read. We first met then, and me and him meeting, it clicked. It just clicked. And so it was like a dinner kind of thing, table, yeah. And so as soon as we met, it just clicked for me. And I just felt like we were together, and I just felt, even though I didn't even know him that well, it just felt that we were gonna make it go. Mm-hmm. And into filming the Underground Railroad, we became really, really close. And for me and all the other castmates, but me and Joel, and also Thuso as well, we all came really close. And it feels like Joel is my big brother.
Oh.
And so, yeah, it just really clicked from there. And that's how it carried on into Homer and Bridgeway.
Joel just has to sit there and listen to us say nice things about him.
Yeah, keep going, Chase. It's all very true. We did click very quickly, and it, there's two different approaches to think about that. One is it benefits you for the duration of the shoot, and the other version of that is you just very comfortably click into a relationship where you look after each other, you appreciate each other, you really enjoy each other. I really enjoyed my time with Chase on and off camera. And he made the day more enjoyable to you know, going to work felt more pleasurable because I knew I'd be hanging out with him and everybody else. But we shared a double banger, and you know, we would have a long chat in the morning, and it was a great way to start the day. And he's a great young man, and it's good to see you via Zoom again. We had a Skype last week, but
Oh, Joel, you're too much.
oh, Chase, I'll call you later. We'll talk about this.
Sheila, what about for you? Maple is from the moment we see her, such a compelling character. I'm curious if she really leaped off the page to you.
Yeah, well, my process was a little bit different because my episode wasn't quite completed yet. So I was sort of made aware of the project through my agent, and was like, yeah, I want to do that. Straight away, I want to do that. Barry Jenkins, I want to do it. Just go and tell them I want to do it. But yeah, no, there was you know, Barry had written like a wonderful letter explaining what his vision was for the piece and explaining how he felt about Mabel. And I, you know, went and read the character, and there were conversations, and then it sort of went from there. And it was really me trying to, you know, use the source material, and then eventually getting hold of the scripts and just working from the text, really. But I think what I found was that from the book, from Colson's book, and from Barry's scripts, the material was so vivid, and the vision was so clear, but also very expansive, that it just kind of gave me everything I needed to get going.
Mm-hmm. So did you commit to the part or book the part, I guess I should say, before having Mabel's episode? I mean, and if that's the case, when you read that, what was your reaction?
My reaction was, I mean, I was so pleased because I was able to see the development from book to kind of screenplay, as it were. And in the book, the chapter's quite short. Mabel's chapter's very short. So to be able to see that stretched out into an hour-long episode, and to see what Barry had done with not just Mabel, but the other characters within that episode, and really made a story out of it, and really, I think, found a way to conclude this series in such a poignant way. It was just really nice for me to see, and I felt it's not that I didn't expect that. I expected no less, but it was really nice to like get that and sort of have that confirmed, and to be able to kind of go back and forth as well between the book and then go to the script and see, you know, the little elements that had been picked out and sort of blown up, as it were, or made more of, or investigated. It just felt like a very live piece of work, you know, which can sometimes not feel like the case when you're working from something that has original source material, but it felt really live and dynamic and like it was developing. So yeah, that was really exciting for me.
I mean, that final episode is so stunning, although I think like a lot of people, I was sort of rooting for a Cora Mabel reunion, which I guess we're not going to get, but it was good to get answers to some questions. Aaron, what about for you? How did this project find its way to you, and what was sort of your initial response?
Yeah, I mean, so Barry visited London in 2018, and he visited the Globe to see Othello, in which Andre Holland was playing Othello. And Sheila and I happened to be in that same show. And that's how...
Aaron, 1 second. I actually have video. This is
Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?
That is August 31st, 2018. And you guys are both on that stage.
You kept that?
That is where it began. I finally found this video.
Well, there you go. There's the proof. There's the proof.
When did you find that, Barry?
I tweeted it from the balcony. While you guys were doing the bow, I took a video, I tweeted it, and then somebody reminded me like 2 weeks ago. Oh yeah, I think we were at the same production of Othello where you saw Sheila and Aaron, and I was like, oh yeah, shit, I was. Here's proof.
Wow.
Video.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so
That's
yeah,
crazy.
that's how Barry discovered us. And Barry just really kindly just shared his appreciation and support on Twitter, and we connected, and then like Sheila said, then the team got in contact with me and said, the Underground Railroad is casting, and here's an opportunity to go for it. And I said, let's just give it everything we have. And then fortunately, I was blessed to be welcomed into this family and tell this very important story.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that you discovered them in theater.
Yeah. It was right before Beale Street premiered at Toronto. I like to take these little trips, and so I just went to London to kind of hang out and see Andre. And then, what do I know? Even from, because they're both tall people, and so even from the second story, you could really see, again, with me, it's all about posture, body language, and expressions. And it was clear. I was like, oh, there's a space for these two folks. And if I'll shout Sheila out, I'll say this, knowing that you were going to be her, it really affected how we adapted that story from the book to the script. And so I think if it wasn't you, the script might be different. And so, yeah, I think the script had to come after we knew it was going to be you. So, yeah. I
want to back up and ask why you were in the second story. You're Barry Jenkins. You can get orchestra seats.
Baby, I want to see. When you at that place, when you down in the pit, the actors are above you, and I'm only 5'8", and you kind of like trying to look around, and I don't want to be looking up at Aaron, all his muscles and shit. No, I was in the second story. I could actually see the performance and see what was happening, and it's great because whenever Sheila came on stage, she would just take the energy, and it was nice to be able to just like change my point of view here, watch this here, and then change my point of view there. So yeah, no, I had very nice seats. And also, I'm just the dude, man, especially in London. I'm just the dude.
I have to say, I saw Sheila and Girl from North Country, and I was in the front row. And you have a good point, because you are very tall, and I was like this a lot of the time. So maybe I should look at those second story seats.
Yeah. Just sit a bit further back. Give it some, 5'11". Give it some room.
I won the lottery, if I'm being honest, for that seat. So I didn't have much of a choice.
Come chat to me. I'll hook you up. I wouldn't have been able to.
Right,
I had no power in that show.
Yeah, that was a hard show to get tickets to. So I would love to talk about the research that went into making this series, because Barry, I'm imagining you had so much, not just as a writer and director, but your below the team is always phenomenal across the board. How did you set out to make this series so authentic? And for the actors, I'm guessing there was collective research for you all to work from, but let's start with Barry.
Yeah, I think one of the really good things was, as Thuso alluded to, the book was there, and I was very adamant. Same thing with Beale Street about endorsing things in the book. Mahershala Ali has scenes that he filmed in Moonlight that aren't in the film, that didn't end up in the final cut. And he's often said, it's not in the film, but it's in the performance. And I think there are scenes in the book that aren't adapted to the screen, but they can be in the performance. So that was one resource. Mark Freeberg, our production designer, he is just like, he's a production designer and a historian. And so he had this whole wing of this elementary school we were prepping out of, where you could go to that space, and you could kind of like time travel almost. And then Colson had shared with me some of his research, and I was down there doing some research of my own, in particular the Writers Project, which was these collections of interviews with the formerly enslaved in the 1930s primarily, before they passed. It's this huge treasure trove of first-person testimony. That was a really big resource for me. But the book was so well-researched and so richly done that was my primary source of information. But, and Thuso was the first person to arrive in Savannah. You got there way too early, girl, because we pushed our production start date by like 3 months. So Thuso was kind of just there in Savannah, Georgia, by herself. And so Thuso was the one who I gave the most direct stuff to pull from, to research from.
I mean, too, so I'm imagining there was a lot of research, but how did you personally go about preparing for the role?
Oh, I fully immerse myself in the research process. I agree. That's what I do. That's my process. I'm always seeking to create the psychology of the character, and the psychology of the character for me is informed by their life experiences. Their life experiences are informed by the circumstances in which they find themselves. And so it's about building their history so that you understand who they are in the present. And so with the information that Barry had sent me, it was both reading and audio tapes, going on YouTube, having sessions with my dialect coach as well, who sent me stuff to listen to read, and then just tracking Cora's journey, but tracking her mental, physical, emotional, and vocal journey. That was the primary thing for me. Often having listened to the audio testimonials of the former enslaved people and realizing that what I'm accustomed to when it comes to hearing stories or watching movies of enslaved people on screen, what I've heard vocally isn't necessarily true to what they were like at the time, became something very, very, very important for me, to the extent that I would, like, as I was working with my dialect coach, I would tell her, this is what's important for me to hear vocally, and sometimes finding moments on set where Barry would give notes for what I was doing vocally, and I'd run to Christy and say, Christy, it doesn't make sense for what we discussed, because it was important for me, as Cora is a character that hardly ever spoke. And so when she does eventually speak, I wanted to, showcase the inner chaos, the inner turmoil, the inner confusion, not only of herself, but also of her environment. So I fully immersed myself into the world of preparation, but with the idea that once I get on set, I kind of let everything I have take over instead of dictating what I think the scene is supposed to look like. Mm-hmm. It's like understanding the rules of the game so that when you get to the game, you just kind of play and not have to think about the rules.
Mm-hmm. William, what about for you? Royal is such a fascinating character to me with so many facets. I'm sort of curious where you really begin when you're preparing for a role.
Well, in a lot of ways, there's certain aspects of Royal which he's just sort of a man ahead of his time, where he just refuses to accept the world as it is, and it's like, because it's wrong. And I think that one of the things that was really useful for me was actually reading narratives of enslaved people and getting to hold on to sort of my modern sensibilities about it. That's sort of like what fuels him and makes him do what he does in this story. And so there was that. And, I've actually, through some other projects that I've worked on, I've finally come in contact with the historical figure, John Mercer Langston, which I knew nothing about. And there's a lot of ways in which he was a man ahead of his time that is, I don't know about for everyone else, but definitely for me, I didn't know about him until I started working on this other project. And this is a man who was an ambassador to Haiti. He was one of the first Black congressmen. Founded Howard. It was just like, whoa! How did I just completely miss all of this in school somehow? And so it was sort of like latching on to people in that time who were like, my rules, and this is how I'm going to live, and sort of trying to just really merge that with the things that were in the book, because there's a way that Royal moves through the world in the book that's very specific, and I wanted to try to honor that as much as I could.
And I also imagine you can do a lot of research and prep, and then you get to set and you put on these costumes and you step onto these, amazing, sets that you have, and that has to help tremendously. Aaron and Sheila, I'm actually really curious about that because, again, it just all feels like it was done with so much love and care. I'm curious what it was like to work on those sets.
I was going to say, you go. The set, I mean, all of my stuff was filmed on the plantation or in the swamp, and the plantation was the first place that I went and the main place that I filmed. And before I turned up there, Barry warned me, and he warned all of the cast who were going to be on the plantation that it looked very real. So, you know, there's two sides to that. The one side is that the design team was so brilliant that everything looked so authentic and was made with such consideration and thoughtfulness and depth of research and, you know, a desire to really honor the authenticity of the time and the story. But also the fact that, you know, we had a director who felt it important to warn us that the set looked real for our own sort of emotional well-being. So that's kind of sums up how I felt about the whole process. Like everybody involved in that team, whether it was, you know, design, whether it was the camera team, whether it was hair and makeup, whether it was the actors, the background cast, everyone was giving 110%. And I've rarely worked on projects where I felt that the team was so generous with themselves, with their talents, with their humility, with their compassion. So I felt really, even though I was there, I was in Savannah for quite a while, but in terms of the actual amount of filming that I did, it wasn't that much. It was, you know, as Barry said a lot, that episode was shot very quickly, kind of in a succession of days. But at no point did I feel sort of overwhelmed or isolated or, you know, like I was being left in the lurch. I felt completely supported, by the craft, but also just by the people and their sort of humanity.
Erin, what about for you, especially for some of the really brutal scenes that you had to witness or go through?
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly very challenging. And I think what was very important to me and all of us throughout this whole process was to just ensure that our mental and spiritual and emotional well-being remained intact. And that was made possible, you know, thanks to Barry and the whole creative team, you know, including the cast, who really held one another and supported one another. And we gave each other what we needed on and off set, whether that be a conversation or a hug. I think, yeah, you know, just in regards to, you know, approaching the character, you know, I think, if I'm being really honest, I was definitely nervous. And it was daunting, the idea of having to somehow bring this character to life, you know, this man who was born in Virginia and promised manumission. The manumission wasn't granted, you know, he's separated from his folks and sent down to Georgia to this plantation where the audience first meet him, to then try and embody a character who has that level of strength and resilience and emotional intelligence to accept their circumstances, but somehow not allow it to engulf them and destroy them. That was a really challenging feat. And, you know, I think thanks to, you know, the guidance of Barry and just the support of everyone I had around me, you know, it was made possible, and hopefully that character, you know, resonates as part of this story.
Joel, what about for you? How did you go about preparing for this character? And I'm curious if he was based on anyone specific.
That's a long answer, but I'll try and just talk about a couple of things briefly. I always feel like that everything you should need, if you had access to nothing else, should be the text and a conversation with the director. And certainly this text can provide so much. The book plus the screenplays and the expansion, the annexes that Barry opened up. Beyond that, I'm less interested in historical research, although it does interest me to go and to have a look at custom and about ideas and ideologies in finding access point to relationships within a story with the actors that I'm working with, to think on a human level about relationships. Because despite the fact that this thing is set in another period, the reason it's successful or successful on a human level is because those ideas connect to the way we all relate to each other now. So I'm really interested to look at and talk about the relationships between Ridgway and Cora and Ridgway and Homer and Ridgway and his father, and start to see how those ideas can connect to a modern world, even though we're dressed so and we're talking so. So that's a lot of my thought and a lot of my research. And then on top of that, accent is, to me, a must. Don't want to end up on the 20 worst accents list in the Empire magazine or one of those things, because self-preservation is preparation sometimes. So that I like to think about human relationships, and this felt so interesting to me on that level.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chase, for you, I mean, you said that you read this all in 24 hours, you were ready to go, but I imagine you picked up some stuff along the way.
Yeah, I did actually. Reading the script, it gave me more knowledge about what happened back then and, what happened with my culture. And I did read Colson Whitehead's The Underground Railroad as well. I read half of it with my mother. She read the whole thing. She binge read it, if that makes sense. She binge read it. And so, yeah. And, just some research here and there, and all with my mom, all research with my mom. And I have learned some of it academically, but they don't really teach much about it in school, but they teach like little snippets of it in history class. But yeah, so that's really how I got my knowledge about it.
Before we go, I just want to double check something that I heard, Barry. You did 10 episodes of this limited series, and I heard you only had 116 shooting days. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, ma'am.
I mean, and I've also heard you say that this almost killed you, and I don't think you were being hyperbolic. I think you actually meant it.
But I should explain it. But once we were making it, it was fine. But getting it to the starting line was tricky. Getting it to the starting line was tricky. But once we would go, because then it wasn't just the five of us, myself and James and Adela and Joy and Mark, my little FSU group. Then it became this huge, huge family. And at that point, the burden was easier to shoulder. So once we got going, it was cool. But getting it going, ooh, man, yeah, it was interesting. Yeah. Was it
the toughest thing you've ever done, would you say?
Yeah, for sure. The subject matter is trickier. It's one thing to be an artist. It's another thing to, as Joy McMillan, my editor, likes to say, you don't want anybody who doesn't want to claim you, And I think with this subject matter, if you don't do it right, some people, might decide that they no longer want to claim you. And so even though the work itself, physically, 116 days of anything is a lot, 116 days of 6 pages a day is a lot. And yet the quality of it, it's got to be better than good. It's got to be greater than great, because it's got to pass the smell test. And so we could have been making Candyland, and it still would have been difficult. But I think making this and knowing what the responsibility of it was made it even more difficult. But look at what we did, y'all. I'm so proud of everyone on the screen, because I do think when folks look at this thing, or when they see any imagery or hear any depictions, any conversation about the enslaved, I think if you've watched this show, you might approach that conversation with a different context.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you all for being here, for sharing your craft with your fellow performing artists. I want to remind everyone that the entire limited series is now available on Amazon Prime. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Janelle.